I'll put it this way. There's every indication that it would be captured under the existing laws. However, given the rolling nature of anti-Semitic hate crimes in Sydney over the last 3-4 months, even beyond that, but particularly a hot period during the summer period, we cannot send anything other than an unambiguous message against hate crimes and anti-Semitism or racism in general in Sydney. I don't want this febrile atmosphere. I don't want to have a situation where people are living on edge. But I do recognise that civic leaders, political leaders need to send clear messages, and that's what we're doing with our legislation. That's what we're doing with the bills that we're putting through Parliament. We want people to be safe in their community and not feel that they're the target, simply on target of an attack or hate speech from a complete stranger because of their race or religion.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight I am joined by John Ruddick. He is a member of the Legislative Council in New South Wales and he represents the Libertarian Party. John Ruddick was actually on the front lines representing many of us during the debate last week when the Labor Party and the Liberal Party teamed up to once again pass some more anti-free speech laws. And just like the social media minimum age bill, the debate went on from Thursday morning last week and it was dragged up until 4 a.m. the next day. So there's a lot to talk about, and I'm going to bring John Ruddick in right now so we can discuss the implications of these bills that have been passed over the last couple of days and weeks. John Ruddick, thank you for joining me tonight.
Anthony, thanks for having us, and thank you for your ongoing interest in this subject of the Parliament restricting our speech.
Likewise, it was actually the first time where I really got to sit down and sort of navigate and understand how New South Wales Parliament works. I've spent the last couple of years so head deep and federal parliament and learning the inner workings of federal parliament in the Senate and the House of Reps. So it was good to finally learn the intricate details with regards to the New South Wales Legislative Council and Legislative Assembly. You were there, and a lot of people didn't know that this was actually happening. Fortunately, federal politics has sort of taken a break, so it gave me the opportunity to post about it, comment about it, and keep everyone updated on it. But for those that don't know, you were there on the front lines. So I guess maybe let's start with an overview of what actually happened last week.
Well, look, as everybody knows, there has been, over particularly December, January, almost sort of every second or third day, there'd be some sort of anti-Semitic attack in the middle of the night. Cars were set on fire, graffiti, other things out the front of synagogues, etc. Now then, so the politicians, weak politicians, like the Liberal Party and the Labor Party, when something is like a really pressing issue in a particular moment, they want it, and the journalists are going to say, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? So they've got to do something. They want to be seen to be doing something. So they've brought in these new restrictions on free speech. Now they know it's not going to solve the problem. Okay, these are very, very deep-seated issues. Little laws on paper aren't going to change anything. But now the politicians can say, oh, well, we've done something. What's the next issue the media wants us to tackle? Now, the view of the Libertarian Party is that anti-Semitism was not created by too much free speech, and it won't be solved by restricting free speech. So now what happened was they had three major bills, which they rammed through on Thursday night. Now, the government's always ashamed of what they're doing when they ram it through in one big sitting, which is what they did with all the gender equality stuff last year. They just say, no, the less publicity they get out of this, the better. So this is why they just ram it through. And I would say, Anthony, most of the crossbench, so that's people who are members there in the upper house, at least, who are not members of the government or the opposition, and there's 12 crossbenchers. There's probably at least 13, actually, out of 42. Almost all of them from left to right were voting against this stuff. Now, then you have a lot of people in Liberal and Labor whispered to people like myself and said, oh, gee, John, you know, if there was a conscience vote, I think I'd be voting with you guys. Now, a lot of people, I'm not going to name names, but I mean, you go through some of the background of these MLCs and they're sort of, you know, pretty sort of cautious about restrictions on things like free speech. So, you know, it's the Labor Party is the most brutal about crossing the floor. I mean, they had a couple of guys get up there and basically give a speech why these laws shouldn't be introduced. But then they said, oh, well, but I'm a member of the Labor Party, so I've got to vote in favour of it. But they actually gave quite good speeches against it. So the Labor Party has this thing, if you ever cross the floor just once, they will kick you out. No ifs, no buts. You can get away with it in the Liberal Party. You can cross the floor, but then your chances of getting a front bench promotion become reduced. So this is how the major parties maintain. Robert Kennedy was always correct when he says, you know, it's always the bad guys in history who want to restrict free speech. And this is just another round. It started in this country federally under Prime Minister Keating in the early 1990s. He brought in 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act. And since then, it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And our ability to have free speech keeps eroding. And now we're sort of basically like the UK. And if anyone watches, you know, the Anthony Kaloof show, Australians versus the Agenda, they would be familiar with what's happening in the UK, where people are getting knocks on the door by the cops and saying, hey, you know, you said something illegal under our free speech laws on Facebook. You know, we're going to, you know, punish you. So that's where we're at now. But the good news is, Anthony, I believe this is the last hurrah of this whole thing. Okay. Thank you, President Trump. Now, what Trump has said more than once, and his vice president and Elon Musk, we expect our allies to uphold free speech principles. Thank you, President Trump. And, you know, Australia is about as loyal an ally as you can get, rightly or wrongly. And so, you know, let's hope that President Trump, you know, when he sort of turns his attention to Australia, he says, hey, Aussies, you know, where's the free speech stuff? So I think all the transgender stuff last year, I think that this Labor government will end up regretting it. And I think the Liberal Party will end up cowardly going along with it as well.
So I have a question about that. So I was stunned when Donald Trump, on his first day of his presidency, signed an executive order to restore free speech and end federal censorship, which is insane to think about even to this day, that an executive order needed to be signed to actually do that. And then last week, a very infamous speech that was heard and commented about around the world from J.D. Vance, the vice president. He spoke at the Munich Security Conference and reiterated what you just said, his concerns about countries not respecting democratic values. Now, I've been watching this for the last 4.5 weeks as the presidency has commenced. And I can't help but realize that it almost feels like Australia is being deliberately ignored. And on one hand, I understand how a lot of people have the sentiment where they think we can't hinge our hopes on US intervention. But why does it feel like Australia's being ignored while they consistently say these things?
Okay, well, look, it is a good question. And yes, it says like Trump has not paid much attention to Australia at all. Now, we are 1/13 the size of the United States, and we are such a loyal ally that they don't have to give us too much thought because we're sort of always there, rightly or wrongly. The European economy is actually bigger than the American economy, but it's obviously split up over 30 countries, 40 countries, whatever. And that's that. And then the Ukraine war's over there as well. But look, at some point, Trump, I think he spoke to Albanese. Look, both the American parties are sort of captured by the defense contractors, and they're all sort of a unity ticket that we need to sort of, muscle up against China. So that's the Democrats and the Republicans under Trump. Okay, now Australia is basically seen as a massive aircraft carrier for America's encirclement of China. Okay, so we're sort of like, their favorite ally at the moment. because we keep getting more integrated with the American military, under every prime minister, whether it's left-wing Labor like Albanese or Gillard, or right-wing Liberal. It's just a one-way street. So they will be, and Trump, while he is being sort of non-interventionist in Europe, which is good, bring that silly Ukraine war to an end, Trump has always sort of wanted to be tough with China. And Australia plays a very helpful role in that endeavour, whether that's right or wrong. The Libertarian Party basically believes that Australia should be like Switzerland, and that is where we don't interfere in other countries. And we don't make half the world hate our guts. So that's how we see the world. No, I can't hear you, Anthony.
Sorry. Just going back to the New South Wales hate speech laws. So I saw one thing that was actually quite funny. You formed a bit of a strange alliance with Greens MP Sue Higginson with regards to comments that you made. It was quite hilarious. I quoted it here. So you said there should be a rule in the Parliament that if the right-wing Libertarian Party and the left-wing Greens are in agreement on something, the chamber should pause and consider that maybe they are right. Now, while I was watching the debate, she had introduced a whole suite of proposed amendments. I think only one of the Greens amendments got up, and there was only 4 that were added to the bill in its final form. Can you just sort of talk us through the bill, what we should be worried about with regards to these laws, and what proposed amendments that you had put forth with regards to sunset clauses? I saw that you made a couple of proposals that you supported on the provision of a sunset clause after, I think it was 12 months, and then it ended on 3 years.
Okay, well, look, I do have to pay tribute to Sue Higginson from the Greens. I think you watched a lot of the live stream, Anthony, and as you would have seen, I mean, the Libertarian Party was getting up there and, commenting as frequently. The Greens really did lead the charge under Sue Higginson. So, kudos there. Now, and I did make the point, I said, look, it's not often that the right-wing Libertarians and the left-wing Greens with very different worldviews agree. When we do, the rest of the chamber should sit back and sort of think about, maybe they've got a point. Now, the only amendments that actually got through were proposed by the Liberal Party. At the very end of the night, the Liberal Party, who had been proposing worse amendments than the Minns Labor government, that they did come through with a good one in the end. So myself and the Greens had been proposing at various points that there be like a review after 6 months of operation and a sunset clause after 12 months. So what that means, we would have had a look at it to see whether this law is really necessary after 6 months. But after 12 months, it would have automatically expired as a law. And that's a really good thing. Libertarians love sunset clauses. We think we should basically bring them in for pretty much every law. But so if it expired, but the consensus was the public and the Parliament said, oh, no, this is a really great law, we need to continue it, well, we'll just go and pass it again. Okay, but when it's restricting liberties, well, it's better to at least put a sunset clause on it. Now, the Liberals voted against all of our sunset clauses, and most of the crossbench, the Greens and the former One Nation people and myself, the shooters went home, of course. They don't really care about things like this, the Shooters, Farmers and Fishers Party. But we only needed one of the major parties to side with the crossbench, and we had the numbers. Now, that happened right at the end of the night when the Liberals proposed a 3-year sunset clause on the most egregious part of the suite of bills, which is the third bill. So after 3 years, the law will expire. Okay, well, that's better than nothing. Okay. So I was calling the Liberals the illiberal party for most of the night. But that third bill, which was the worst one, Anthony, that third bill has now made it a crime to incite an emotion in somebody else. So if you incite somebody to violence, like you're egging them on to go and burn down a building, and then they go and then a mob goes and burns down the building because you've been whipping them up, saying, there's the building, let's burn it down. And then people go and act on that incitement. Well, that was already a crime. That's the incitement to violence. But now we've got, under New South Wales law, at least for the next 3 years, we've got if I get up and give a speech in the Domain and somebody thinks that I'm inciting hatred in another group, well, I now could go to jail for 2 years. Anybody could. Okay, so this very, very nebulous definition of trying to identify exactly what is incitement to hatred. But it's basically, we're criminalizing an emotion. So now the Liberal Party and the Labor Party who brought in these laws, they just went home after night. They said, we dealt with that. Okay, what's the next on the political agenda? They don't really think these things through. So there was another one in the first tranche, which I think said it was making it a crime to go and have a protest out the front of a house of worship. Now, initially, when I first looked at this legislation, I thought, okay, well, I suppose that's one that we could consider supporting. Okay, because I mean, if you're having, if you've got a Mormon church there or a Catholic church there or a Buddhist temple, and someone wants to have a protest right out the front, and they're making it sort of difficult for people to get in and out, I thought, okay, well, maybe people could be asked to stand aside. But anyway, I asked the Attorney General. I said, okay, well, look, how often is this happening in New South Wales? In the last 12 months, how many times have people had a protest at the front of a house of worship? He said, I don't know. And he had an advisor there, so I will get back to you, John. I said, okay, cool. They never got back to me. As far as I can tell, there has only been one in the last 12 months. There was a pro-Palestinian rally going down Elizabeth Street in Sydney. They just happened to come across the Great Synagogue or the Grand Synagogue there in Elizabeth Street. And I think they sort of hung around for 5 minutes. They were probably maybe saying a few unpleasant things, and then they were moved along. And when you think about it, if you've got a good cause that you want to protest, it's not going to help your cause if it gets on the news that you were being unruly out the front of a house of worship. So I just don't think the incentive is there for people to go and have a protest out the front of a house of worship. Now, of course, once a decade or more, there may well be a legitimate reason why we should have a protest out the front of a religious institution. It might be a financial scandal, it might be a sexual abuse scandal. The churches and the other houses of worship generally, don't attract protests, but occasionally they do. And it's good to have that option there because sometimes these protests are worthwhile, they're righteous. So, and then they've just gone and basically doubled a lot of laws already that existed for graffiti. Okay, so they've just double criminalized things just so they can say they've done something.
Do you think that it's going to have the effect that they want it to have with regards to effectively making the Sydney CBD a no protest zone? Because one thing that I saw from an image that was posted a number of weeks ago with regards to the anti-vilification amendments that they're trying to push through in Victoria at the moment, there was a graphic where if you put circumferences and you put circumferences around the areas where there are places of worship in the CBD, around key areas where most people usually go to protest, you create this no-go zone for the whole of the Melbourne CBD. Do you think it's going to have the chilling effect rather, that it's going to make people not want to protest? Or do you think that the Department of Prosecutions and the police, New South Wales Police, they're going to be they're not going to abuse their power when it comes to determining who gets to protest or not?
Well, look, that's a very good point. And in fact, the Libertarian Party moved an amendment along those lines. The way the legislation is drafted, you can't have a protest out the front of a house of worship. And there's a lot of houses of worship across Australia. In fact, once a week, at least once every 2 weeks, there's some form of a protest out the front of Parliament House in Macquarie Street. Well, there's a church right across the road as well, St. Stephen's Presbyterian Church, right there. So I said, well, look, we need an amendment because, sometimes people like to protest near, police stations or courthouses or town halls or parliament houses. And I said, well, look, we've got to sort of, clarify that if there just happens to be a church there, they're not actually protesting about the church, then, they should be exempt. But no, the government didn't want any changes to their bills. But in terms of, is this going to have the desired effect, which we'd all like to see the end of these sort of random, aggressive, violent, often attacks, anti-Semitic attacks. So now look, what is extremely likely is that these attacks are related to the war in Gaza. In fact, that's a certainty. Everyone knows that. And the good news is that that war is wrapping up. Okay, and so therefore, when people watch the 6 o'clock news or they scroll through their social media feed, they're not seeing a whole ton of stuff about Gaza because the war's come to an end. Well, let's hope it has. It looks like it has. And so that means just people will be less fired up about it. And so that's probably what there was a spike in these incidences over December, January, but they do seem to have stopped about sort of 3-4 weeks ago. Okay, so I think it is a coincidence that as things have dialed down with the introduction of these laws. Now, what these laws will actually do is make things worse. That is what the libertarian view is, because the people that there's 2 types of people that sort of engage in the anti-Semitic stuff, public anti-Semitic stuff. There's the hardcore pro-Palestinian people who don't like the state of Israel. And then there's a really tiny group of Nazis, basically. Now, both of those groups want to recruit people. And when they recruit people, it is typically males between the ages of, say, 15 and 25. Now, when they are doing their recruitment activities now, they will be able to say, hey, look, we're so powerful, the government just had to pass these laws against us. And it sort of makes it exciting, like they're joining a little group that is, the government has to pass their own laws about. And it makes it, for a certain mindset, a very small minority, but a not insignificant minority of young boys, typically young boys, almost exclusively, they sort of get entranced by that. Okay, so what the Libertarian Party believes is the more free speech, the better. The less that the government tries to sort of restrict what we can say, the better. If everyone can have their say, including all the people whose views we disagree with, and not just disagree with, sometimes we find that those views are, reprehensible. But if we let them have their say, then they don't attract this sort of that they're a special group. Okay, they just okay, have your silly say, and then everyone will move on. When we go and criminalize it, we make it a much bigger deal. And then what happens, Anthony, is every 2 or 3 months, someone gets arrested for breaching these really tough laws. And then what do they do on the courthouse of the court? They go and give a Nazi salute or something, and that makes the 6 o'clock news. And that's exactly what they want. They just want they want this publicity. So these laws are only going to fuel recruitment efforts.
So you said it at the start, the laws that they've passed, it comes off as if it's like a PR stunt, like a Labour Party PR stunt with regards to them appearing to be tough on anti-Semitism. And I agree with that. But despite them doing this and the AFP coming out a few weeks ago, I believe it was, and saying that these crimes appeared to be conducted by overseas organized criminals, not by anyone in Australia, not by nationalistic Australians, which you've alluded to. Why are people that are patriotic Australians paying the ultimate price with having these laws passed when they have laws already? They had laws already prior to last Thursday to catch these people. They've acknowledged that no one in Australia, at least at the moment, are conducting these crimes. They believe it's linked to organized crime overseas. Why are laws being drafted and passed and making it so that Australians, everyday Australians, are paying the ultimate price for, a small group of people that feel like they are being targeted with these crimes? Why all of this PR, stunt? Why all of this narrative pushing just to make it out like the government actually wants to do something when they already have the tools at their disposal? I mean, just yesterday in Victoria, 100 police officers were there to arrest 3 gentlemen that were at the Shrine of Remembrance, not for anything with regards to political protest. They were there to just pay their respects at the shrine. But then when it comes to serious crimes, where I'm trying to just draw a parallel where there's actual, people wielding machetes and killing people. They seem to complain about not having the resources at their disposal. So I want to land it. Why is the government using PR stunts to appear to be tough on anti-Semitism? The federal police have acknowledged that it's not nationalistic Australians committing these crimes. There's no proof of that. There's proof from the AFP that it's organized criminals, but we are all paying the price for it, despite them having the resources to punish whoever's responsible anyway.
Well, look, I have seen the headlines about the claims that some of these attacks, all these attacks, whatever, were somehow sponsored by overseas criminals, which certainly makes it pretty murky. But look, I really can't comment on that because I haven't paid too much attention to it. But I do agree that it is extremely interesting, and I very much hope we can get to the bottom of it. But look, what happened a few years ago is, I think it was Dan Andrews down in Victoria. He thought it'd be a good idea. Let's ban the swastika. Now, who the hell is going to stand up and say we shouldn't ban the swastika? Well, I'll tell you one group that did, and that was the Libertarian Party. It's not like we like this silly swastika, but the alternative to having it banned is that when you ban it, what you're actually saying is that you're saying you want the police to knock on people's doors and threaten violence to take down a symbol. Okay, so while we don't like the swastika being displayed, we would prefer people to have the freedom to display it if they're silly enough to do it, rather than live in a society where the police can knock on your door and threaten violence because of a symbol. That's the least of two bad options. Now, the other thing is, I'm 54. I've never seen anyone publicly display a symbol in Australia. Okay, so it was a non-issue. Okay, but Dan Andrews said, "Oh well, let's ban the swastika." Okay, and everyone just clamours over themselves. Oh yeah, let's do that. It wasn't an issue, and I can't even remember seeing swastika graffiti. Okay, I'm sure it's out there somewhere. I never saw it. Okay, but so they brought that in, and everyone said, "Well, look, it's just a one-off. It's just a one-off. Just this one." Everyone said, "Look, it's a one-off part of history, and so therefore it's justified." Okay. So that goes through all the federal parliaments and this state parliament. Okay, but then the Libertarians warned, look, the other downside with banning the swastika is it will become a slippery slope. Once they've banned one symbol, they'll start banning more and more. They'll ban direct free speech and banning symbols, which is another form of free speech. And so here we are, and here they just keep introducing these laws. So then what will happen in 2 years' time? There'll be another weird one-off sort of spate of incidences about some group of people. Then they'll say the silly young kids who are most of the journalists these days. They'll ask the politicians at the daily press conference, "Oh, Mr. Minns, what are you going to do about this terrible thing that's happening?" And Mr. Minns, "Oh, well, we're tough, man. We're going to go and we're going to bring in a new law about it." Okay, so this is where we're at. But anyway, look, we'll just keep resisting it. I'm confident that we'll turn it around, and. But in terms of your main question, why is this happening? Well, why it's happening is most politicians, their sort of their mindset is, one thing: how the hell do I get re-elected? And they just want to keep the media happy, okay? And that they are really just show ponies. I'll tell you who's running the government. It's the bureaucrats. The bureaucrats have been around for 40 years. Some of these senior bureaucrats, they know everything about their little department. Then a minister comes in. The minister's got no idea what's going on most of the time. And the minister gets treated with a lot of respect and everything else. A big, nice office, a driver, big, nice title. And the bureaucrats are very deferential to them. But the minister's officially got the power, but the minister just relies on what the senior bureaucrats are saying. The senior bureaucrats always say, "Oh, well, how can we make the government more powerful?" Okay, and one of the ways to do it is restrict free speech, is what we're doing here. But look, one other little thing, I won't say who said it to me, but another crossbench backbencher said to me when we were voting last Thursday night, said, "You know what, John? There's a ton of laws already on the books to deal with all this stuff, and they're not enforcing it." He said, "So I'm not going to lose sleep over these new laws. Yes, they're going to double the penalties, but they'll still be the same level of motivation for enforcement. It'll be selectively enforced, of course. If you've got a left-wing cause, they'll generally give you a sort of a pass. If you've got a right-wing cause, then what will happen is they won't give you, they'll use it, the slightest excuse they can get to enforce these laws.
Just on that topic of bureaucrats, it would be almost hard for me to not ask this question and see what your thoughts are, because it was probably the most stunning part of the entire debate last week. Mark Latham had come out and said that, and he actually said this, I believe it was just after yourself. He said that powerful Israeli lobby groups should be kept at half an arm's length because, as well-intentioned as they might be, they have a long history of wanting to censor others. I wanted to get your thoughts on those remarks, partly because they were made just after you had spoken on this bill, and also because there's a growing sentiment online where people are starting to become more and more concerned about how Israeli lobby groups specifically, but bureaucrats more broadly, seem to be the ones dictating these laws in Australia. I wanted your thoughts on those comments that Mark Latham made, and also your sort of broader thoughts on lobby groups and bureaucrats dictating legislation in Australia.
Well, look, every day I have, half a dozen groups or more wanting to come into my office and talk to me about things, and they're always very sort of passionate about their particular cause. Look, I've had 2 or 3 Jewish groups come in, and and I like chatting with them. I had a Muslim group in last week, and so I believe that lobby groups are a good thing. Okay, it's good that politicians hear from representatives of important community organisations. Look, I can honestly say, that there was no Jewish lobby trying to twist my arm to see how I would vote on these bills. They probably knew that, that I was going to be voting for free speech, because that's what a libertarian is going to do. So I didn't have anybody, connect, didn't even sort of want to meet with me. So, so I can't speak to that.
I guess maybe if you could maybe give your thoughts on those comments with regards to Mark Latham. Is that something that does happen though? Because I don't know too much about Mark Latham's history in politics. The one thing that did stand out for me was the fact that he almost successfully became prime minister, but I was just barely an infant child at that point. So I didn't really know. I didn't know much about that. But with regards to his comments, are they true? Like, is that something that does happen within the New South Wales Parliament?
Well, it hasn't been my experience, particularly with the what you're calling a Jewish lobby. Look, I am sure that look, the Jewish people are more than anything else a family who can trace their family tree back about 4,000 years, and they have suffered, many episodes of mindless persecution. So I'm sure they have lobby groups, and I think that that's a good thing, because many community groups out there do form associations where they can come and talk to members of parliament. So, I try to meet with as many as I can, and so I did. Mark Latham said last week that he's been a lifelong supporter of the state of Israel and a lifelong friend of the Jewish people. Yeah, then he made some comments about the Jewish lobby. I think he was talking about Bob Carr. And look, I suspect that a lot of these lobbyists aren't really, they want to talk to the major parties probably more than they want to talk to a humble crossbench like me.
No, fair enough. I just thought it was interesting what he said, what his comments were, and sort of like the online discourse surrounding this issue. I just wanted to see what your thoughts are, particularly because they were mentioned just after you had spoken as well. So you were there to see what he had to say about it. On to the Grand Senate primary strategy that you'd posted about earlier this afternoon. Talk us through that, because it looks like it's a promising thing with regards to the proposal. I went through your post, and one thing that a lot of my viewers had learnt over the last 12 months is how powerful and important the Senate is, but how much the major parties are able to abuse the Senate with regards to it's supposed to allegedly be the House of Review. What's your Grand Senate primary proposal? Talk us through that.
Okay, at the last federal election in 2022, let's call the minor parties to the right of the Liberal Party, they got about 11-12% of the vote across the country. Now, that was easily enough to get 6 senators from the minor right parties, which would be, the Libertarian Party, One Nation, Clive Palmer's party. And on the left side of Australian politics, to the left of the Labor Party, there is basically one significant party called the Greens, and they get about 12% of the vote, and they get 6 senators with that 12% of the vote. So they get 6 senators every 2 years, which means they end up with 12 senators, which is what they've currently got, if you include Lydia Thorpe, which you may as well. But they got 12 elected anyway. Lydia Thorpe might have left. Out of 76, that gives them an enormous amount of power. Now, right now, out of the 76 senators, there's 21 crossbenchers, and Anthony, that is the highest it has been since Federation. So the power of the crossbench is growing. When I was growing up in the 1970s, the crossbench typically had 1 or 2 crossbenchers. But now the crossbench, because people are getting their news from a diverse range of sources, and that's why, and they are therefore end up voting diverse ways. People who listen to your podcast are probably going to be influenced to vote in a different way than if you watch the Channel 9 news every night. And because there's all this explosion of new news sources, people are voting in different ways. So what's happened is the minor right only got 2 elected in 2022. They got Senator Hanson returned and Senator Babette elected in Victoria. If we were smart, we could have got 6. We could have 12, a big block of 12. Now, how do we do that? Well, I go through in this post on X, which I put up a few hours ago. There's 4 ways to do it, but I go through why the other 3, like a merger or a preference deal or some parties standing down in favour of the strongest candidate. I went through all the reasons why they're not a great idea. So this is what I believe we should do. We should invite the half dozen, maybe a little bit more parties on the minor right to a meeting. Invite all the members, say at the Sydney Town Hall for New South Wales. So we might have 2,000 people in that Sydney Town Hall. And all those parties have currently got a Senate candidate in the field, or they're about to announce a Senate candidate. And I say, okay, well, look, all the Senate candidates for the minor parties should get up and give a speech, answer questions, have a bit of a debate, then we all vote. So all the United Australia Party people can vote, the One Nation Party people can vote, the Libertarian Party people can vote, and we'll vote for who we think's the best. Now, if you're a party that's participating in this process, you're going to have agreed in advance. Whoever comes first is the top of a joint ticket. So we have like a coalition ticket. So let's say the One Nation person might come first, and then the Libertarian comes second, and then the Clive Palmer outfit comes third. So we would put those people on that order in the Senate ticket. Now, we would still encourage all the minor parties to contest the lower house seat, hand out as many how to votes, etc., campaign as hard as they can, and then they vote in the lower house seat. Then they'll also, their how to vote will say, and here's how to vote for our joint ticket in the upper house. Now, if we do this, Anthony, we won't have, out of those 4 crossbenchers that we have at the moment, 4 of them are reliable. Babette, Hanson, Ruddick, and Roberts.
Yep.
We should have 12 or 13. Okay. And so how we can do that is what I'm calling the grand primary. And I think it'll add a lot. You can live stream it. Okay. And we can really pump it up. It can be a big deal. And whoever wins that grand primary is going to walk out of that process with a bit of wind in their sails, a bit of confidence. They've just proven they're a vote winner. And then all the other parties aren't going to run against them. They'll just be this one big joint Senate ticket. And they're probably going to bloody win the pre-selection and the election. They're probably going to be a senator in Canberra for at least 6 years. Well, that's a good thing. Now, I hope it's all won by Libertarians. But let's say Libertarians don't win one of these grand primaries in one of the 6 states, because there'll be 6 of them for each state. Well, and let's say Jared Ruddick wins in Queensland or Malcolm Robert wins in Queensland. Now, they're not members of the Libertarian Party, but I'll be really happy if they're in Canberra as a senator for 6 years, because I like them and I agree with them on most issues. I'd be a little bit happier if it was a Libertarian, but if it's one of the other guys, same in New South Wales. Craig Kelly is the Libertarian Party candidate for the Senate in New South Wales. Let's say we have a grand primary, and let's say the Trump and the Patriots person wins. Okay, cool. So Craig might be number 2 on the ticket. He's not going to win, But I can't argue with it because we had a democratic vote. There was a couple of thousand people said, well, this person from Trumpeter Patriots is the best option. So I say, okay, cool. Well, let's hope he wins, because I'm sure he'll be better than Labor or Liberal or the Greens.
So I'm just going through your post here. You have at the end of it, you say, let's imagine a month from now, 1,000 minor right party members spend a day at the Hobart Town Hall and hear speeches, etc., from 6 candidates who represent 6 minor parties on the right. Let's then imagine One Nation candidate comes first, Trumpeter Patriots candidates come second, and it just goes through each candidate, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. On the day of the federal election, there will be an option on the Senate ballot paper that is a joint ticket, and above the line it will say One Nation, Trumpeter Patriots, Libertarian Party. The grand primary strategy would be a good theatre and live stream, so we can reach and persuade more voters from amongst the general public. As an open democratic process, we will motivate volunteers and donors. The membership of various parties overwhelmingly get along, and while some may be disappointed if their preferred candidate doesn't win, there'll be a respected amongst the process because of the process. Each lead Senate candidate would have the legitimacy and momentum coming out of the grand primary, and you reach out to Senate party executives to reach out to coordinate this. Is this something that you want to try to coordinate, hopefully next month, barring any spontaneous announcements in the next couple of days? Is this something that you want to try to coordinate ASAP?
Absolutely. Well, look, what we need is we need a groundswell.
You're just covering your mic.
Sorry, you got me now?
Yep.
Sorry about that. Okay, well, look, what we're hoping to generate in the next week is a groundswell of people who are members of these minor right parties saying, look, this is the best bet we've got. Let's get behind it. And then they can convince their executives. So then if the party membership speaks up loudly enough, they can tell their party executives, hey, we want to do this. So it's the smart option. So what I'm hoping to do this week is just generate interest, have discussions like this with as many people as I can, and say, look, let's be smart, let's be strategic here. Let's get 6 senators elected. So now if after a week we there's a pretty broad consensus that this is a good idea, then we've got to try and have some type of a national summit of key people from the various minor parties and say, well, look, let's get this show on the road. Let's book out the Sydney Town Hall and the Hobart Town Hall and the Adelaide Town Hall, and let's pump this out there. Let's on the Anthony Kalush show and everybody else, Australians First the Agenda, let's tell the whole world to come along and watch. And if you're a member of a party, vote and help us select the best candidate. So yeah, I'm hopeful of pulling it off for the coming federal election.
Awesome. Do you feel like this is something that we need to do because of the reform that they've just passed for next election? That they've changed it so there's going to be restrictions on donations for independents and minor parties at the 2028 federal election. Yeah,
well, that was bad law because when somebody wants to donate money to a political party, that is an act of free speech. They are saying to that political party, I like what you're saying. I don't want to run for parliament myself. I might be a businessman or whatever, but here's $1,000 to make so you can fund it so more people can hear about your message, which I agree with. So these are bad laws. And it is going to change Australian politics. When there's a lead up to a federal election, everyone knows about it because there's so much TV advertising. And even if you're not interested in politics, you'll still know a federal election's coming up. But average Joe Blows out there, they don't even know a state election's on until about 2 weeks before it's on, because the parties just don't have the money. They don't have the money to put TV ads on to reach the sort of the apolitical people.
So if we can coordinate this and we get everyone on board from the minor parties, what do you think is what's this event going to look like from, say, the start of the day to the end of the day? Give them a visual sort of idea of what this might look like in practice. Okay, so let's say New South Wales, I reckon we'll get 2,000 people there. Let's say we kick off at sort of 10 o'clock in the morning at the Sydney Town Hall on a Saturday or Sunday. Let's say Sunday. So we'd have, let's say, 7 parties are participating.
all those 7 parties will put up their Senate candidate. Their Senate candidate will have been campaigning for a couple of weeks before on social media, saying, "Hey, come along to this grand primary at Sydney Town Hall. Come along and hear what I've got to say, and if you don't agree with it, vote for me. Vote number 1 for me." So then they will come out and give a speech for probably 15 minutes. Then they'll answer questions from the crowd for, say, 15 minutes, and then we'll go through all 7 of that. So that's about, with breaks included, that's about a 3-hour process. Now, then at the end of that, I reckon we should have a debate for an hour, like those US presidential primary debates. They can all stand up there and just random people from the crowd say, "Hey, what do you think the ideal level of taxation should be in this country? Or what do you think our policy should be on China? Or what do you think about, taking 15,000 COVID vaccines? Do you think that's a good idea or a bad idea?" Okay, so they can all get up and say that, have the debate. Then everyone in that room gets to have a vote, 1 vote. Now, there's lots of little rules we have to work out, okay? Do you have to be a member for 1 day or for 6 months? Do non-financial members count? I think they all should. I think we want to open it up as much as possible. Liberalise it. The more democratic it is, the more people there, the more theatre there is there, the more atmosphere there is there. So we open it up, and I believe what will happen, Anthony, is the best candidate will friggin' win. That's what will happen. That's why we want to do it. The vote-winning candidate who can make a good argument, who looks good on stage. Now, there might be differences about what the average Libertarian believes and the average Palmer Party person believes and the average One Nation person believes. But you know what? We basically agree on 80% of things. There are differences. And there are important differences. But on 80% of the time, we are in agreement. So therefore, if we go through this process and no Libertarian candidate tops the ticket, I'll say, well, that doesn't matter. I mean, that would be my preference. But thousands of people have said this person's the best candidate. They will vote on merit. They will vote for the best candidate. And that's a good thing. Now, what's going to happen is if we don't agree with this, we're very, very likely to repeat what happened in 3 years ago in 2022, when we got 2 senators elected. In fact, we could even get less on this occasion, okay, if we're not smart at this critical moment.
Well, I guess it's probably a responsibility for all of us. We've got just about 1,000 viewers to hopefully push this message out to as many of the minor right-wing parties. So I've actually just reshared your post. I encourage everyone to check it out. So John Ruddick, he's on X. He's just posted a quite lengthy proposal. It's called The Dilemma of Multiple Minor Right Parties, the Grand Senate Primary Solution. He's just given you a visualization of what that might look like. It sounds like a good idea. One thing that I do know for an undisputed fact is that we only have one more chance at this. One thing that I am also concerned about is time. Hopefully we have time on our side. So I encourage everyone that's viewing to check this post out. Comment your thoughts on it, because John Rodik will go through your feedback in the comments. And I guess final thoughts on just with regards to the state of the Libertarian Party. There seems to be a groundswell of support on social media. There seems to be a lot of people getting ahead of the announcement of the federal election and campaigning, setting up call flutes and putting out content out there. Just give us an update on where the Libertarian Party is with regards to their campaigning leading up to the election.
Well, look, I believe this is the libertarian moment around the world. We've got the great Javier Milei in Argentina doing a magnificent job. Trump doesn't call himself a libertarian, but Elon Musk does. And what he's doing with this Doge is absolutely brilliant. It's extremely libertarian. A lot of libertarians have been skeptical of the Trump's second term. They said, oh, well, it'll be chaotic like his first one was. I think the dumbest thing the Democrats ever did was steal the 2020 election off him, because now he's had 4 years on the bench and he's really been able to get a very good team together, and he's been able to really think about how he can be a historic president. Now, this Doge is the best thing of all time. We knew there was a lot of government waste and inefficiency before. We were not aware of the extent of how much outright theft there had been involved in the US government. And this is going to clean things up, funding silly left-wing causes all around the world with endless bloody money. But Musk is showing us, and Javier Milei is showing us that we need to. The government's way too big and bossy. This is the libertarian moment. So we are. Well, I'm obviously involved in the New South Wales division. We've got Craig Kelly is currently our candidate for the Senate. We're hoping to contest pretty much every lower house seat in New South Wales. We won't be contesting the federal seat of McMahon. Matthew Kamanzuli is running there, and we like Matthew. He's not a member of our party, but he's a good guy, and we want to sort of, give him a free run there. There may be one or two other seats we step down in, but we want to give it a red hot shot. I think Craig Kelly's got a pretty massive social media platform. Elon Musk recently retweeted him. I think Craig Kelly, I've got to know him very well recently, and he's a very, very nice guy. And he had more guts than anybody on the COVID and on global warming. Well, they're the two biggest issues that there are. And so we're very, very hopeful that we can get Craig. He needs about 7% of the vote in New South Wales to have he'll pretty much get elected if he can get 70%. And I think it'll be a very, very good thing if Craig Kelly can go back to Canberra.
No, awesome. And I just want to say thank you for joining me tonight. I really appreciate your time. Not many people actually knew that New South Wales was pushing through all these laws. And I was just very grateful that you were able to not only jump on tonight, but also Thursday night you were messaging me back and keeping me updated on what was happening in the chamber. So I really appreciate that. I hope everyone sort of got a bit of understanding and a bit more of an understanding of what these laws are about, especially in New South Wales, and the implications on that. I do agree with what you said with regards to them. It was more of a PR stunt than anything, because at the end of the day, these laws are probably just going to be used in the same framework as the current laws that they already had prior to last Thursday. The only difference is the threshold of penalty has gotten a little bit higher. We've gone through your proposal with the Grand Senate primary. I do encourage everyone to check out his post. I've just retweeted it. So go on X, follow John Ruddick, and check out his recent post. It's called The Dilemma of Multiple Minor Parties, Multiple Minor Right Parties. And one final thing, I hope that everyone in Victoria that's watching can do me one thing. I'm going to put out a tool, because just like New South Wales, there are currently laws bills before Parliament that are very similar to New South Wales with regards to anti-free speech laws that we spoke about tonight. They're called the anti-vilification amendments. The difference between these laws and in New South Wales and Victoria is that they're actually making the penalties much harsher. But not only that, they are making it so the groups of people that are targeted are much more broader. So a lot more people are going to be affected. And the Liberal Party, no less, is actually trying to remove the political communication clause in the bill. So it will become a bit more dangerous. In the New South Wales legislation, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, they've actually kept the political communication clause in there. So at least we're protected in that regards.
You're right on both fronts. Yes, the New South Wales political communication is protected, and I understand in Victoria it won't be. I understand the Victorian legislation or bill, which I have not read. I understand it is worse than the New South Wales ones. Yes.
Yep. So one thing that I will put up on my page shortly is a tool that's created by the Free Speech Union. You'll be able to write to your Member of Parliament in Victoria. We didn't have much of a chance to stop the New South Wales laws. John Ruddick was very pivotal in at least trying to get some protections for us in the New South Wales amendments that he put forward. We do have about 10 days to stop, or at least try to put some pressure on Victorian members of Parliament. So I'll put that post up. If you're watching from Victoria, please write to your local representative, and let's see if we can put a stop to these hate speech laws, or these anti-free speech laws, as you've called them. Thank you to everyone that's joined us. Thank you to yourself, John Ruddick. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for representing our values. I really do appreciate it. Everyone, please follow John Ruddick on X. His account is John Ruddick 2. And like I said, check out his post, because this might be our last chance to put as many senators into the federal parliament, protect our rights, protect our freedom of speech, protect our freedom of assembly, and then you know, this event looks like a fantastic proposal. I hope that this is something that we can all get behind, and I encourage everyone to check it out. Thank you for your time, John Ruddick, and thank you
Anthony.
to everyone for joining me as well. I appreciate it. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.